There is this deadly superstition among classical music composers, which frightens them from ever composing a 10th symphony. The legend goes back to the 19th century, and some early classical music composers didn't complete a 10th symphony because they died after working on the ninth. Ludwig van Beethoven, Franz Schubert, Antonin Dvorak, Anton Bruckner, Gustav Mahler, Kurt Atterberg, a Swede who believed romantic music should portray and strengthen national identity, while opponents defied the character of modern music as transnational, globalist, and cosmopolitan. Ralph Vaughan Williams, who was inspired by traditional Tudor music of his native Britain. Roger Sessions, Alfred Schnittke, Vincent Persichetti, who taught Philip Glass at Juilliard, Egon Welles, Alexander Glazunov, who reorganized the Petrograd Institute after Bolsheviks destroyed it, and Malcolm Arnold all died after or while composing their Symphony No. 9. Beethoven was the first to suffer the consequences of this so-called curse. 3 years after he finished his Symphony No. 9, he passed away during a thunderstorm night at the age of 56. His autopsy revealed liver damage, potentially due to ingesting lead, which plates were made of back then, and he left behind a draft of his incomplete Symphony No. 10. Years later, Schubert, Dvorak, and Bruckner died while having completed a ninth symphony. Only 5 of Dvorak's symphonies were actually known during his lifetime, and his New World Symphony is the most popular today. Mahler actually completed a draft of his 10th symphony before he died of a bacterial infection in the blood at age 50. Although Mahler finished a composed symphony, it is still considered incomplete because he didn't get to orchestrate it. The curse of the ninth, superstition, originated in this late Romantic period of classical music, when the works of Wagner were being rewritten and reimagined. According to Mahler's friend, Arnold Schoenberg, the superstition began with Mahler, who, after writing his 8th symphony, wrote Das Lied von der Erde, or The Song of the Earth, which, while structurally a symphony, was able to be disguised as a song cycle, each movement being a setting of a poem for soloist and orchestra. Then Mahler wrote his 9th symphony and thought he had beaten the curse, but died with the 10th symphony incomplete. The superstition was only hatched by Mahler. Before him, Beethoven and Schubert had died before or while writing their 10th symphonies. Upon realizing this, Mahler created the curse of the ninth and led the superstition into popularity by seemingly proving it true. But Mahler's life had some difficulties that cannot be traced to a curse. Alma Schindler, Mahler's wife, became resentful because of Mahler's insistence that there be only one composer in the family, and she had given up her music studies and considerable music talent to accommodate him. The role of composer, the worker's role, falls to me. Yours is that of a loving companion and understanding partner. I'm asking a very great deal, Mahler wrote, and I can and may do so because I know what I have to give and will give in exchange. She wrote in her diary how hard it is to be so mercilessly deprived of things closest to one's heart. Mahler's requirement that their married life be organized around his creative activities imposed strains and precipitated rebellion on Alma's part, who engaged in infidelity. The marriage was nevertheless marked by expressions of considerable passion. Mahler converted to Catholicism for her from his native Judaism. In the summer of 1907, Mahler was exhausted from the effects of a political and propaganda campaign against him in Vienna and took his family to Mernigg. Soon after their arrival, both Mahler daughters fell ill with scarlet fever and diphtheria. While diphtheria had been largely eradicated from the West today, we see it in cases due to uncontrolled borders and uncontrolled migration coming in from the Middle East and Africa. Anna Mahler recovered and became a famous sculptor, but after a fortnight's struggle, her sister Maria died in July. Following this loss, Mahler learned his heart was defective, and this diagnosis was confirmed by a Vienna specialist who ordered a curtailment on all forms of vigorous exercise. The extent to which Mahler's condition disabled him is unclear. His wife wrote of it as a virtual death sentence, but Mahler wrote a letter to her in 1907 saying he would be able to live a normal life apart from avoiding over-fatigue. During this time, it was Alma who was expected to be fatigued and perform all necessary care. Mahler died of a bacterial infection worsened by his weakened heart in 1911. Alma survived him by 50 years and remarried twice. Arnold Schoenberg, Austrian composer, was friends with Mahler. After seeing what happened to his friend, he developed the hypothesis of the curse behind the Ninth Symphony. It seems that the ninth is a limit, he said. He who wants to go beyond it must pass away. It seems as if something that might be imparted to us in the 10th, which we ought not yet to know, for which we are not ready, those who have written a ninth stood too close to the hereafter. Schoenberg's obsession with numbers and superstitious nature may have triggered his death. The composer was terrified of the number 13, and according to a friend, he feared he would die during a year that was a multiple of 13. This possibly began in 1908 with the composition of the 13th song of the song cycle Das Buch der Hangenden Garden, the Book of the Hanging Gardens, which some consider a symphony itself. Schoenberg pushed forwards a theory of music that every musical piece should be divisible into twelfths and not the natural ninths. He dreaded his 65th birthday in 1939 so much that a friend asked the composer and astrologer Dane Rudhyar to prepare his horoscope. Rudhyar did this and told Schoenberg that the year was dangerous but not fatal. But in 1950, on Schoenberg's 76th birthday, an astrologer wrote Schoenberg a note warning him that the year was a critical one because his age added up some to 13. This stunned and depressed the composer, for up to that point he had only been wary of multiples of 13 and never considered adding the digits of his age. 7 plus 6 equals 13. He died on July 13th, a Friday, 1951, shortly before midnight. He had stayed in bed all day, sick, anxious, and depressed. His wife Gertrude, who was his second wife and had been a sister of one of his own students, reported in a telegram to her sister-in-law the next day that her husband was dead. She explained, "About 11:45, I looked at the clock and said to myself, another quarter of an hour and then the worst is over. Then the doctor called me. Arnold's throat rattled twice, his heart gave a powerful beat, and that was the end." Despite the prevalence of the superstition, those composers didn't listen to Schoenberg's advice to stop at the ninth, and 6 more composers died. Is this a coincidence? Maybe. There are cases of composers who didn't die right after composing a Ninth Symphony. For example, Peter Maxwell Davies, who found out he had leukemia while attempting to finish a 10th Symphony in 23, didn't pass away until 2016 at the age of 81. There's also Philip Glass, who has gotten all the way to Symphony No. 11, published in 2017, and the 81-year-old composer is still alive today. Maybe he broke the curse by actually finishing a 10th Symphony right after the 9th, or maybe fate still has a plan for him. Whatever the reasons and consequences are, the threat of the Ninth Symphony curse lives within the heads of classical music composers. In 2012, in an interview, Philip Glass stated, "Everyone is afraid to do a ninth. It is a jinx that people think about."